Brian Nobles. Looks like this hurricane is going to be very wet.
Yeah, it is going to be bad, Bill. I thought for a hot minute that I was going to have to go be in the middle of it, but they diverted my responsibility.
Well, and how about we're hearing
be dry.
How about we're hearing right now that the forecasters are saying that the storm is taking a bit of a turn to the south, and it's really close, certainly in Georgia, but really close to that Florida border now, and it looks like a dead-on hit into South Carolina.
Yeah, and I think the big thing they're worried about is that it's going to get off the coast and just stay there and twirl and just pour rain down on a big swath of the eastern seaboard without moving. And that's when it gets real dangerous. I mean, high winds are one thing. Most of these places along the coast can prepare for high winds. The buildings are built to sustain high winds. They know how to get their power back on quickly. But there's really not much you can do if the rain just keeps falling and falling and falling and there's nowhere for the water to go.
Yeah.
You just have a massive flooding event. So I think that's what the big concern is right now. But the storm still seems pretty unpredictable. They don't know for sure exactly where it's going to hit and what it could do after the fact.
All right, well, by tomorrow we'll know a lot more. How about the week in the circle of President Trump? This has been quite a week, starting with Bob Woodward's book and then the editorial, the op-ed that came out. This week, of course, we're dealing with all the aftermath of that. What's your sense here this morning?
Well, when we talked last week, the op-ed had really just dropped, and we were still trying to sort out exactly what the impact of all of it was. And I think we've seen it kind of manifest itself in the fact that here we are more than a week after it came out, and the White House is still being forced to talk about it, still being forced to answer questions. And I bought the book last night. I've read into the first chapter, and the first scene in the book is this scene with Gary Cohn, the former head of the Council of Economic Advisors, and Rob Porter, the president's former staff secretary, who had to resign his post in a domestic violence accusation. And it talks all about how Porter and Cohn made sure that there wasn't this important document on the president's desk related to the situation in North Korea, because they didn't want him to willy-nilly sign something that would cause global chaos. And what you saw the White House being forced to do this week was have these very carefully worded and managed statements from both Porter and Cohn released yesterday, where they completely refute the claims in the book. And what the president and his team are trying to do is they're telling you, here is the president and here is Bob Woodward. Whose credibility do you trust more? And it's almost a Rorschach test to a certain degree. I think it shows you the depths of a support one might have for Donald Trump, because Bob Woodward clearly has a pretty strong track record, and the president is what the president is. So
Woodward last night said he talked with one upper-level senior White House official who in private told him yesterday that his book is 1,000% accurate.
And I think that the thing about Woodward is this is a little bit different than the Fire and Fury book, right? The Wolf book. Woodward's is far more meticulous as a journalist than Wolf is. Wolf tends to peddle in rumor and conspiracy, where Woodward is somebody who fact checks, does his process meticulously, is from the old school journalism 101 world. And, he says in the foreword of the book that not only did he talk to all these people who are directly connected to it, he did talk to them on deep background, but he did it in a way where he recorded every single one of these conversations to be as precise as possible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is one of these situations where, as the individual reader, and it's not my job to give the individual reader an assessment of what they should think, but you use Bob Woodward's credibility, you compare that to the president's credibility, and you have to make a decision. My guess is it probably doesn't move the needle all that much with the president's hardcore supporters. But the question is, as we head into this midterm election, and there's this big group of independent swing voters that may have voted for President Obama, then voted for President Trump, may have voted Republican in past congressional elections, but now are thinking about voting Democrat. How does that impact the 2018 midterms? And I don't necessarily think this is the panacea that's going to give the Democrats back the House, but you have to imagine that it's going to at least impact it in some way.
Let's talk about on the op-ed. I mean, this is really terrible when you think about that. This person is claiming that there is a secondary government being run that has not been elected. That's the key part of this, and is not accountable to anybody. That's all being done underneath the eyes of the president. That just doesn't seem very. It's not the way it's supposed to be done.
Well, you know something. Let's take aside the president as a character, the accusations that are made in the op-ed, and who may or may not be the op-ed writer, and just if you laid out a plot for a story that intertwined all these different elements, you could just as easily make an argument that this is some sort of conspiratorial coup that was the beginnings of inside a duly elected government.
Yeah,
and I do think that is a pause for concern. I don't necessarily think, if you're one of these people that is cheerleading the author of this op-ed, calling this person a hero, saying that they're saving the country, how would you feel if this were Barack Obama's presidency and someone else were doing it? And I should say you could flip that around for Trump supporters as well, who are calling this person a coward and a traitor. You probably would describe this person as a hero if it was happening in the Obama administration. But there is a problem here, Bill, and I agree. I think the president has a point with this idea that whoever this person is, and they claim to be a senior-level administration official, the New York Times has described this person as such, this is somebody that's in meetings on a regular basis that is understanding and learning about the inner workings of the Trump presidency. And if they are working to systematically undermine it, they are working to systematically undermine an administration that was elected by the people.
Is it possible? Is it possible that somebody has actually signed the oath that it wasn't them, that they're actually one of the people? I guess it is.
I think anything's possible at this point, Bill. If the person is willing to hide behind being an anonymous author, they're certainly probably they probably knew that at some point someone was going to look them in the eye and say, "Are you the author?" And they were going to have to say no.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they couldn't continue to work in the administration. If the person is as high level as they say they are.
I got about a minute left. Obama came out on Friday and gave a blistering speech about the president and about Republicans. And not surprising, Republicans denounced it, claiming that it's ridiculous, it's desperate, didn't work back when Hillary was running. Democrats on the other side applauding. They think it's the greatest speech on earth. Does it move anything? Does he actually accomplish anything?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Barack Obama is still the most popular figure in the Democratic Party, and he still remains one of the most popular figures in American politics, and he also remains one of the most divisive figures. So he's much like Donald Trump in that realm, maybe not to the extremes that Donald Trump is, but Barack Obama is one of the few people left in American politics that can incite passion on either side. So I don't think there's any doubt that Democrats see the president speaking again, the former president, and that excites them. They pine for the days of the Obama presidency, and that perhaps maybe motivates them in some of these key districts to vote for the Democrat if they were just frustrated with the process and weren't going to get involved in any way, shape, or form. But I also think that there's probably a lot of Republicans in some of these swing districts who weren't necessarily fans of the Obama administration for whatever reason that see him speaking again and say, man, I don't really like Trump, but I didn't like those 4 years either.
Yeah.
I'm going to at least keep the Republican House in place because I like those guys.
It's an interesting strategy because what you're saying is, you might be immobilizing Democrats, but you also might be doing the same for Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point. And that's the calculated risk that President Obama is taking. I've always thought that the better move for a former president in a case like this, and you see George W. Bush doing this, which is rare for him, is raising money. That's still their most effective contribution to a campaign. Raising money in high-dollar, closed-door fundraisers. They can bring in millions in a very short amount of time.
Yep.
And what these candidates need more than anything is a resource to get their individual message out. Because if you revert back to this hope of transitive property between Obama and Trump, then you've got yourself caught up in that. I mean, if you're Anthony Brindisi, for instance, what Anthony Brindisi wants to do is define himself as the representative for the people of Central New York.
Yes.
He doesn't want to represent himself as an arm of Barack Obama or Nancy Pelosi. It doesn't do him any good for Barack Obama to descend into Central New York and say, hey, look at this guy, he's with me. He'd rather define himself as somebody individual who's going to be an independent voice in Washington.
And that's going to be the really interesting part because Claudia Tenney is all in with President Trump. It's going to be interesting to see which strategy works out. Ryan, as always, thanks so much. We'll do it again next week.
Thanks, guys.